So I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Michelle Benegas. I'm a professor of second language teacher education at Hamline University in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I am the chair-elect of the teacher education interest section.
And I'm Faridah Pawan. I'm the chair for the teacher education intersection as well. And I see Kate Reynolds. Kate, you want to say something?
Hi, everybody. I'm saying something. It's good to see everybody here. And this is, I think, our first town hall. So I'm kind of excited about it.
Kate is our chair-elect. And so she'll be, she's been in our team for quite some time. And so we're glad that she's with us, and welcome everybody. And so I think, Michelle, you're going to start us off with some thoughts and contextualization of the session.
Yeah, absolutely. So when Faridah and I talked about this coming year and what we wanted to prioritize as an interest section, first Faridah came in with a global perspective, saying that she really wants to hear voices from around the world about what teacher education looks like. So we've had a series of webinars looking at teacher education in different contexts around the globe, which has been awesome. Our world also changed pretty dramatically in March. And so we thought maybe in addition to those webinars, we would have a town hall, which is just a space where we can come together, talk about what is concerning us, what we're wrestling with, and also share ideas about what is working in our contexts. So we're going to have two of these, one today and the other one in the winter. And the topic for today is teacher education in the time of the COVID pandemic. So we'll be talking through, starting with some concerns, moving into some brainstorming of ideas, and then closing with hopes to move forward. And I oversee an ESL licensure program, and we have very much been in this space of Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, Plan W, X, Y, Z, and I know that so many of you are living in that same space. So why don't we start now with the very first question, and I'll make sure as I ask the question to also put it in the chat box. So I'll ask it and I'll put it in the chat box. The question is, what is your primary concern about preparing teachers in your context for the coming academic year? You can go ahead and chime in verbally. We'd love to hear your voices and see your faces if you're comfortable with that. You could also throw it into the chat box if you're more comfortable with that. So again, the question is, what is your primary concern about preparing teachers in your context for the coming year?
This is Julie Sugarman from MPI in Washington, D.C., and I just wanted to chime in that from a policy perspective, one of the things I'm really concerned about is keeping good people, well-trained people in the profession, and the idea that we may have a lot of people retire in the U.S., and when we already have an ESL teacher shortage, I'm really concerned about how we have the, what we do on top of the teacher shortage. So that's what I've been thinking about.
That's huge. That's really a macro look at this issue, isn't it, Julie? Like the long game. That's really important to be thinking about. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Georgios from inside Arabia. I'm from Greece. Hi, Kate. Hi, Faridah. Hi, everyone. So I wanted to chime in that the primary concern that I think we're facing here in, I would say, the Middle East or the Gulf region is the uncertainty of the how we're going to be next semester. So we're like, some of us are like 2 weeks away from start date. Some are 4 days before start date. And we still don't have like a definite plan. Is it going to be online? Is it going to be a blended model? So we don't really know how to prepare teachers because we did the emergency remote instruction. We didn't kind of like a middle thing in the summer. So now we don't know, are we going to be fully online or are we going to be hybrid? Because, training teachers takes time and people need to be, prepared well. And we cannot be preparing them for like 3 things at the same time. So we need to focus on one, but the information usually comes a day or 2 before starting classes. So that really bothers students, teachers, and pretty much everyone that's involved in the learning process, and the students as well, because we also need to think from their perspective as well.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's really tough when you're supposed to be the one that has it all figured out and you're leading, but then you really don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next. It's very frustrating. Anybody else?
I'm Kanduk and I teach in Germany. I teach at the University of Siegen on the teacher education program. And sorry, can you hear me? Yeah. And one of the classes I teach takes my trainee teachers into a secondary school for their face-to-face element. We do that every 4 weeks. My concern is obviously how to make up for this practical classroom experience when on the one hand, the university says it's all, all things back to normal, so full face-to-face, max class sizes, and on the other hand, the secondary schools are very much restricted by the regional laws here. You can't have strangers coming into schools, you've got to have small groups, and things like that. So that's my concern. How do I make up for that missing face-to-face element? In the last summer semester that finished at the end of July for the same course, we just had to scrap the face-to-face element, which means I've had to change my way of assessing them. I couldn't assess them on their classroom practice. We did everything on Zoom, so they couldn't even simulate that in our own face-to-face classroom with our peers. So, I'm concerned that they're losing a big chunk, and this is actually the only course in their teacher training program at university where they actually get practical classroom training. So, if that's gone, they're totally disadvantaged.
Yeah, that's really tough. We have another question specifically on coming up about practicum, student teaching, clinicals. So, how are we ensuring that teachers really have those hands-on skills moving forward? I see from Ray, she says, providing meaningful field experiences. So she agrees with you. Teachers are so overwhelmed right now. So I'm hopeful there will be cooperating mentor teachers who will welcome them into their classroom. Absolutely, we're concerned about that. And then Kate says, increasingly the teachers I'm working with are asking for digital resources and information about teaching online. So we're having to catch up with them pretty quickly. Looks like Nikki agrees with that. Yeah, and maybe some options for sharing resources. So maybe I'll take one or two more comments on some concerns, and then we'll start moving toward some solutions, ideas for solutions.
Hello, hi. This is Hind from Saudi Arabia. I think one of the main concerns is testing students, finding ways to test students for entrance exams and final exams, because we're used to the traditional method of testing, could be online or paper-based exams, but testing entrance exam students who are joining the college, it's a bit difficult, and finding ways to have proper assessment ways, like making sure that the students don't just copy the answers, and making sure that to assess the students and accurate as well. So that's one of the things that I think we struggled with last term. Thank you.
Absolutely, that's huge. Thank you for sharing that. I see in the chat box that Kate has shared her extensive Pinterest page on ed technology, so you could check that out for some supports.
It's little stuff that teachers could use. So, but it's not going to, kind of orient a person to online teaching, particularly of younger grades. And that's, I think, an area where I'm struggling a great deal, because I have a lot of elementary educators I'm working with who have to deal with things like the child behaving in front of the computer and things like that. So, not running away.
Yeah. So it looked like Reg says, I echo Khan's concerns. Some of our teacher ed courses are asynchronous and fully online. So my concern is, how will our teacher candidates acquire real world teaching skills through these asynchronous online courses? I see a lot of heads nodding in agreement. All right, why don't we move toward the next
I want to
question?
respond to that because I
Okay.
think, teaching on, sorry, let me put on my video. I would like to respond to that because I think we could be online for a really long time. So teaching online is a real world teaching skill, that we might not be going back to face-to-face classes for a long time, and teachers are going to have to teach online. So if they do that in their practicum, that is a real world teaching skill.
Nikki, it looks like Kelly Cosner agrees with you. She says, but also this might be the real world. I think that's something that, maybe we need to add this tool to our toolbox, that we haven't been adequately preparing teachers to teach in a context like this, and we need to adjust in that way. It's a really, really important point.
And
I'd
if
like
I
to
may
share
add,
Oh, sorry. No, you go, George.
Sorry, Kate. No problem. If I may say that maybe online teaching might, be added in the BA programs or master's programs in the future as a standard, because it hasn't. I mean, when I did my master's in 2007, we just had a call class, computer assisted language learning, and that's it. But we never had a class about how to teach online. I think there was there as an elective, but, really not too many of us took it back, 13 years, 14 years ago. So I think maybe this is going to be maybe a range of classes, how to teach reading online, how to teach writing online, conversation. I mean, because I think that, I'm new to this, but I think it's a whole new world. It's a whole new philosophy, and it's evolving like rapidly and around the world. I don't think there's any country that hasn't been affected and hasn't changed their way of teaching, of conventional teaching as we've known it for, 50 years, 100 years, and so on.
So I wanted to add to Nikki's comments and to George's that last regular term, because we had a summer term here, but last regular term, all of the students who were going into student teaching or who needed to do practica, they shadowed teachers online, which I thought was really rather cool. So that was for them a real world teaching experience, and it did qualify, and it kind of helped alleviate some of the stress for the teachers who were also moving into this new venue rather abruptly. But, and that's how they got their credits for this. But I felt like they weren't adequately prepared. None of them were. At the university, I felt, well, okay, university educators, we've been dealing with this for quite a long time. We've been taking classes, we've had trainings, we have our classroom management systems, but it's really, in the different K through 12s, the classroom management systems they're not always present, or they're all different in different places. So how do we prepare them for that? Or how do we prepare them for using Skype versus Zoom versus other chat rooms? I've been using Blackboard Ultra. There are a lot of different ways to have a synchronous class. So there's the variables kind of morph exponentially. So those are some of the things that have been going through my head over the last 6 months is, okay, on any given day, I will try to answer students' questions when they have them about this,
Yeah. I like what Kendi says, a definite paradigm shift for us all, admin, teachers, parents, and students, that, probably everyone in this Zoom room, top of mind for you has been education. And now safety is, we're realizing that education is really not as important as keeping your body healthy and safe and keeping your family alive. It's really causing us to reassess all sorts of things. There's a great conversation happening in the chat box, so I encourage you to just keep checking in there. And we're going to move on to question number 2. Faridah, if you want to throw that one out to the group.
Oh, okay. And the second question that Michelle had put together is on how to support students during this online during this COVID pandemic. And I think for us as a teacher educator group, it is about supporting our teachers. How do we support them to do their job? And I think just looking at the chat, one of the things that we've been talking about is in terms of practicums, how do we support teachers trying to do that? And some of the things that people are doing are looking into programs like Go React, whereby teachers can record themselves and then they can look at themselves and annotate what's happening, what's not happening. And so it's a form of reflective professional development, things like that. So that's essentially the target of the second question, is how do we support teachers to do their job, being a teacher educator group that we are in this group. Any takers to the question? Just jump in. Just jump in.
I'll say something. I was the one who raised the concern about real world skills and what we are with a given context. I think one of the challenges is I think as teacher educators we need the same support that we're going to give our teachers, and so one of the things is that I don't feel confident and qualified to teach somebody online teaching skills because I'm learning them myself as I go here. So I need the same support, and I understand that I can provide that support, but we're in this situation where we're all kind of learning while we're teaching. So when it is a teacher education context, it becomes a little bit of a different challenge, I think. The support and being supported.
Any other thoughts on that?
I'd like to know how many people are at the beginning stages of online teaching and how many are a little bit further along, because we could set up a mentoring system.
Well, it's interesting. Pearson had a survey, at the beginning of the pandemic in March or in May, and they said 70% of professors, at least in the US, have not taught online. And so that's a big number. That's a big number. And it's not surprising, obviously, but it's a large number of people that have to.
Yeah, sorry. Was your question about student supports or teacher support? Because I thought I heard student support.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that I suppose we could do both, but one of the things about the group is that we're teacher educators. And so our students are teachers. So how do we support those teachers in terms of their professional development, or in terms of the pre-service teachers, how do we support their learning to become teachers? And so that's our student body. And so that's what I think, if we can, to focus on that. If not, we'll just go whatever direction, but those teachers are our focus, and how do we support them to do their job?
I think another sort of new thing that's going to come up is helping new teachers to understand how to advocate for their students in a new way. I mean, we've been talking about that in the TESOL field in terms of ESL teachers in the US, or English language development teachers supporting students in mainstream or general education classes. But what's that going to look like in the online world, I think is really quite unknown, and how teachers will be able to, will we still have the same kinds of coordination between English language development and classroom teachers, and all those questions coming up, and how to help the new teachers understand even what the questions are going to be, even if we don't know what the answers are.
Yeah, I think at the NILPA conference, also early in early May, one of the advocacy efforts is to reach out to parents more, helping teachers reach parents, because they're at the front lines, at this point in time, and finding ways to do so is a huge element of, teacher support.
I think when it comes to advocacy, and TESOL had a whole summit about advocacy and students, and teachers and everyone. I think that this pandemic has given much more of a power to online teaching, because in some parts of the world, online teaching is not even considered as teaching. Degrees are not accepted and all that. So I think by that, and we were discussing that earlier today in another discussion, that online teaching gained power. Maybe people did not used to think that it's good quality or it's quality teaching, but online teaching was there when it was needed, and it was overnight. In my institution, we decided Monday we're going to go online, and Tuesday we had Zoom accounts and everybody was online. Did everybody teach perfect the first day? Do they still teach perfect? Of course not. but it was there. So I think advocating for online teaching from, the teacher's perspective is very, very important. And I hope that, the momentum is not going to go away when online teaching is not essential. And although I think it's going to be, quite a long time, but I think it was a very, very important step for recognizing all these students, teachers that have been getting online degrees all these years. And, at some point they were considered like, category B of degrees, or the teachers there were not, real teachers, but, online ones. So I thought that was very, very important, advocating.
Yeah, you're right, Georgos, because in some countries, online teaching, if you get a degree, it's not recognized if it's all online. At least in some countries, at least 50% of it has to be face-to-face. Rightly here had a comment on refugee. If you're there, can you share a little bit as to what's happening with teachers supporting refugee learners? Supporting teachers of refugee or newcomers or students with refugee backgrounds. Can you share a little bit if you're online at this point?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes.
I'm sitting outside and there's an airplane flying overhead. Sorry. Yeah, there is a ton of work going on. I can add some resources there, but teachers, especially in Minnesota always kind of sets the bar really high for adult education and teaching refugee background adults. And they are doing so much cool work at Literacy Minnesota in terms of staying connected to students via teaching on WhatsApp and using Wix and Weebly and creating other really kind of simple websites that students can access even if they don't have high digital literacy skills. And I just posted in there a couple of training videos from Literacy Minnesota and New American Horizons that have really nice models of in-class classroom practice. But yeah, I'll share some links because we just had a webinar with LESLA, Literacy Education and Second Language Learning for Adults. And we shared some resources from teachers on how they're doing distance and remote learning with refugee background adults.
Has anything, can you share with us a little bit more as to what are some of the things that are emerging as most important in terms of teacher educators supporting teachers of refugee students and other newcomers?
In general or specific to distance learning?
In terms of distance learning.
Well, because we all sort of fell in crisis, the programs that have succeeded the most are the ones who already prior to the pandemic had started using technology in the classroom. So that sort of teaching them how to use the digital tools, how to access, use WhatsApp and navigate Google Drive and Google folders and things like that. Had they been able to do that in person, the transition was much better when they went online after the pandemic. So to the extent possible, if teachers can possibly visit their students in a safe way to sort of introduce them to the tools. I was teaching a class and we weren't using a lot of tools. And when this happened, I lost contact with most of them. Even though they know how to use WhatsApp, we didn't really set the routines in place for online learning whenever we were suddenly cut off from each other. Whereas in other programs where they had been using those tools, they just transitioned seamlessly to online learning.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I guess, reach out to them, try and do some in-person work if you can, and then get back online. But they're thriving in a lot of communities, the online learning, and WhatsApp and Zoom are really effective.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think, I think one of the things that I've discovered at my institution is that it's similar to Georgios. It was, we're starting tomorrow, here you go, it's all online, go have fun. What I discovered through my own experience is that I think you can only effectively, or you can only give a good online program or a good online experience if you yourself have had a good online experience, because then you know what works, what doesn't work. So I've been lucky in that sense, and my university also from the get-go, they've put in a lot of workshops to support us. So there were, these hours where you could sign up, and they had them at all times of the day for all, teachers, so lecturers and professors to participate in. I think one thing, two things that came out for me from the student experience was that my students said that they had so many different courses, and on average they were using 6-7 different tools a week. which means because we had, my university was all, all enthusiastic about this, and they invested in all possible tools. So everyone decided to work with what worked for them, which obviously for the students, one day they were working with Zoom and another day with Jitsi, and sometimes they were on Moodle and sometimes they were on something else. So that was not a good experience for them. The cognitive overload was just too much. And I think the second thing that came out for me was that maybe we need to teach our students how to be online learners, because it's very difficult. They find it difficult. And I think if you've not ever done any kind of course online, then you struggle. You do struggle. So those are the two things that I took from the students.
Well, two things that have emerged in terms of teacher education is that one of the things that we used to approach it as just in case teaching. Now it's just in time teaching. Teachers want to be supported as the problems are emerging. So all the, professional development programs that we used to have, like, these are the sessions that you will have in the summer or whatever it is, that's just not working anymore. Teachers want just in time type of support rather than just in case. I think the other thing that has to emerge is also the idea of, helping learners become autonomous and self-regulated learners. Finding ways to help them be that is actually becoming more and more a center of discussion. And so, I'm just saying that as a means for me to seg into Michelle, who's going to take on the next question, which is
before we move on to can I just from all this conversation, something came to mind that I think we discussed in my TESOL Launch Live a couple of months actually ago, and talking about diversity and everything. I think we also need to see other forms of distance education or things that have emerged or have happened, and they're not online education. So in that, my TESOL Launch Live, and forgive me, I can't remember which one it was, I've heard and listened to, teachers saying, our students didn't have internet. They used buses as Wi-Fi's. They would deliver a stack of papers per week. And this is not in a country that you would not think of. This is mainstream United States. I mean, we all heard the stories of, national TV being used for educational purposes, the radio, sending paper packs to students. But this has happened everywhere. And I think we also need to see, how did these teachers get in touch with their students? Not through their computer, not through their phone, but they've been so creative. And I think it's very, very important, because this goes back to what you were saying, Faridah, that they just had the situation and they had to adapt. Right now, there's no internet. They just have to send the worksheets to their students. They have to collect them back. Buses, drivers, parents, friends, everybody, I think, contributed to that process. And I think this needs to be mentioned as, maybe it's an example for teacher educators in the future. What can you do, if that happens? And
thank you for calling that out. Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, there are schools right here in my community, some who had, fully online synchronous classes all day, every day, some that had kind of hybrid, and there were kids getting packets. So I think most of us could think of our own context and see the gamut of experiences that learners had. I see Kate saying the digital divide is real. Absolutely. So I want to move on to the next question, and something that Faridah and I talked about quite a bit in planning this is that the conversation is so often around the teachers and how they're teaching their learners, and it is it's so infrequently around how are we interacting with teachers? How are we serving teachers, right? What sorts of options are we and supports are we offering to teachers? So the next question here is, what flexible programming options or modalities are you offering to teacher education students? And I want for us also to hold kind of in our thoughts what Khan said a minute ago around the technology fatigue. That we may in just a minute see a tidal wave of different approaches here, and think about what would that be like as a student, right? So I'll throw that question in the chat box. What flexible programming options or modalities are you offering to teacher education students?
I've been doing a lot of task-based learning. where they can, anywhere they are, they can use whatever resources they need to accomplish certain tasks. And then I'm setting the tasks based on the kinds of skill sets and knowledge base they need to acquire. So they can do that through books and libraries, or they, public libraries. They can, they can do it digitally if they have the digital resources. They can go out if they are safe to do so, and they can perform a task. But basically just lots of task-based instruction. So it doesn't matter necessarily modality.
Thanks, Kate. That makes sense. Anybody else?
Some great comments on chats here about one of them, pro-literacy, webinars on adult ed programs. Sarah, if you're there, share with us what that's like in terms of supporting teachers.
Oh, well, hi, I'm Sarah. I run a small ESL program for adults, mostly immigrants and refugees in Pennsylvania. And Pro Literacy did just really great webinars for adult education throughout the summer, and they have recordings of them, and they talked a lot about people who were especially working in rural areas where they didn't have the access to the resources online, and there were just really creative suggestions from people. So if that's something that you guys are interested in, I definitely check out Pro Literacy. They have the recordings all posted on their website, and I found them really helpful.
Can you share some examples, Sarah?
Well, there were a lot of people working with packets, but there were also like creative suggestions about how to use them and how to reference the pages even. So they had suggestions for color coding and numbering things to make sure that like your students were able to follow like where they were. There was a lot of stuff that was done just over basic phone calls as well that was helpful. And they talked about different resources that you could access to for trying to get your clients online, or to help them get the technology that they needed.
Thank you.
All right, so we've heard, I love that idea of using the phone. That's one that I think we don't consider for whatever reason as a valid tool, but it absolutely is, and a lot of people have access to it. Kelly says, switch to online teacher ed courses as PD has led me to very individualized approach. For field-based tasks, I've provided the assignment as it has always been done in face-to-face and let the teachers propose how they could meet the basic requirements translated into their environment at the moment. So I've heard a number of asynchronous options, right? We know that in some parts of the world, they're using television as well. I'm curious to hear about synchronous options, kind of like that telephone idea. What are you doing to support your students in synchronous ways, your teacher education students?
Well, one of the things that I've tried is, I don't know, some of you, I'm sure are familiar with course networking. And the way I've used that is for them to share the journal synchronously what's happening. This is what's happening to me right now. And so it's just creating an outlet for teachers instead of intellectualizing it as the need to analyze what the experience was, but just creating an outlet for them to kind of share, this is what's happening. The students are coming, I don't know how to reach, whatever it is, just putting it out there, journaling their experiences, as they go. And so, it's just a way for them to share and for us to see what's happening as they are teaching.
Mm-hmm. I like what Ray shares here. She says she's shifted to having students design activities and deliver instruction with teacher talk via Flipgrid. I think Flipgrid is such a nice kind of bridge between synchronous and asynchronous. Flipgrid is asynchronous, so if you were to do a Flipgrid, you would see all of these faces just like you see right now on Zoom, but you could click on them, hear what your friends or your classmates have to say, and then you can record a video to respond. So it does feel like you're in a community. I think that's a really nice tool if synchronous is just not possible.
And also, Michelle, in my classes, I do use breakout rooms for micro teaching. So in pairs, they would develop activities and then they would deliver them to their peers, and the peers would act as learners. And so it let them sort of see what it was like to teach via Zoom, putting their students into shared Google Docs to do brainstorming activities. Some of them found really fun online games that they had their students play, like word searches and, you know, other simple activities, Jeopardy, things like that. And it worked really well, and it let them see and experience what it was like to deliver instruction online.
Nice. Thanks. All right, Faridah, should we move on to the next question?
Sure. The next question, I think, is what we've been talking about, which is, you know, what are the approaches that people are doing, innovative approaches to student teaching and practicum requirements and other aspects of teacher education that we're involved in. And so these are so number 4, the focus is on innovative approaches to engage teachers, pre-service teachers in practicums, and to engage in-service teachers in continued learning. What are the innovative approaches that you have encountered or are you thinking of or coming up with? To give you an example, Paula Golombek has something called Tiny Talks, whereby she has her teachers send her clips of their reflections, very short clips through on the phone, to let her know what's going on in their minds and what their needs are. And she will respond also in tiny talks. You know, that's how she supports teachers as they're teaching.
Faridah, Georgios has a really good question to follow up on our question. It's something I've been wondering myself. Do you want to take that question?
Yeah, so yeah, thanks a lot. I was asking, and I wanted you know, people that had experience online, because talking about teacher observations in online environments. So we've been using a software before for face-to-face observations, and quite frankly, we didn't use it last semester. But now the new semester is starting, and I want to see how did you know, how did observations work in different teaching environments with teachers or student teachers.
What are you thinking, Georgios? What are you thinking about doing in your setting?
You know, see, it's the uncertainty again, if we're going to be fully online or if we're going to be hybrid or if we're going to be face-to-face. So these are the 3 different settings. So if it's face-to-face, it's just going to be the same old, you know, observations, you know, pre-observation, you know, you observe, and post-observe, you have the meetings and everything. If we're doing it online, I might just join the class and it might be the same process, but I don't know if that's, you know, the best that has happened, or if there was anybody else that had anything more creative or had an experience, because we made a decision that we weren't going to observe our teachers in the summer semester because of, you know, all of these, we were teaching online. So we said that in the new semester, we're going to discuss it based on the environment we're going to be operating in. So we're still in the process of, you know, kind of brainstorming.
You know, I'll share that I did do some supervising, some observing in the summer. I observed one synchronous lesson, and then I wanted to observe another one. But what the teacher explained to me is that she had prepared a 20-minute lesson, and she would deliver that lesson between 9 a.m. and 12 noon. And whenever a student was able to log on, she would start the lesson. So we had one student on at 9 a.m. and then, you know, around 9:10, another student logged on, and they just had to wait. And then as soon as she was done, she started all over again. It was like showing the same movie over and over again. And so she said, well, if you want to observe me next time, you can come, but I don't know what time students are going to log on. And I understand the rationale behind that is flexibility for students, but I couldn't just hang around for 3 hours waiting for somebody to show up. So in that light, I would rather just have them send me a video.
Yeah, hey, this is Ray again. So we were in the middle of practicum in the spring when we went online, and so my students had to shift really quickly from the real classroom to the Zoom classroom, and they were all, they're undergrad TESOL students, and so they were with cooperating teachers. So the cooperating teachers just sort of seamlessly added them into the Zoom classes as hosts, and they could manage breakout groups and things, but they would have to schedule with me when they were going to deliver an activity, and then I would come into the class at that time. I would show my video, introduce myself to all of their learners, not to be this crazy person just all of a sudden in their class, and then I would hide my video so my student wouldn't feel so nervous, and they would proceed with the lesson. And there were a few times where I couldn't make it at the same time as the class, so I would have them record it, and they said they preferred that because me being there, even as just a little tiny icon on the video classroom screen, made them nervous, just as I do, I guess, when I'm in the real classroom with them. So I think my student teachers preferred recording and sending me the file and then me giving them feedback. And I think also for the English language learners, that's maybe a better approach because, again, you're not a sort of a stranger dropping into the classroom.
One of the things that I'm seeing that I'm really enjoying is teachers reflecting on their own recorded teaching. And so that is just fabulous. And we have so many technologies helping us with that. You know, just going back to what we know, reflective teaching, and technologies have allowed us to do so. And I use Go React quite a bit, whereby teachers and myself can annotate, you know, what they're doing and what I'm seeing. And then, but the most powerful thing I think for them is to be able to see themselves teaching. It's like stimulus recall, you know, reflection in action and reflection on action. All of that is possible now, which is fabulous.
One of the things I noticed that with the students all moving online in the spring quarter, I knew that my students were suddenly going to get overwhelmed with the same pattern to approach online learning. So in anticipation of that, I decided to ask fewer discussion questions. And I started a flipped classroom format because I realized my colleagues probably wouldn't use flipped classroom. And I started making short videos, very short videos, so students could just watch a little segment on one thing and then they could move on from there. And as a result, I made their discussions around homework that was a task. When I did that, after they had, you know, so the module sequence would be readings, lecture or lectures, and then in-class synchronous meeting, and then the students would have homework they would discuss. That was a task, and then they would take their weekly quizzes. So that was a reflection based on anticipating a problem. So I reflected based on certain things that I knew were going to be that I knew would be good learning. And I preemptively tried to solve some problems. So I thought I'd share that with y'all.
I'm seeing in the chat box folks talking about the role of the cooperating teacher or the mentor teacher. And in some cases, the mentor teacher is so appreciative to have another teacher supporting them, another adult that can engage with learners. But in other cases, the mentor teacher is saying, I am overwhelmed, I have too much going on already, I cannot take on more work. And then what do we do in that case? That is really hard. Oh, you're muted, Faridah.
And here, Helaine Marshall, who's done a lot of flipped teaching. And I think as in terms of teacher education and teacher professional development, Helaine, you want to say something about how you support teachers?
Okay, we all have our COVID hair, you know? Oh, brother. Okay. Well, you know, this discussion has been so interesting for me because my students and I just went rolling along in March because my program's already online. And what I do is flipped online learning. So the model, I kind of developed it over the years. And in fact, just now with Ilka Kostkov, and even know her from Northeastern, we just published an article on it, and I put the link in the chat. So this is called the SOFLA, Synchronous Online Flipped Learning Approach. And one of the things that we stand by is the importance of the synchronous piece. And I realized that, you know, access to technology is an issue, and we talked about that. But in terms of teacher education, most of the teachers in my program, they know the program's online, and we know they have the equipment, and we train them on the equipment, and, you know, so that is a kind of a given. So we meet our regular mandated number of contact hours online. So my classes meet for 2.5 hours. We take a break, and I have a cycle I go through. It's an 8-step cycle, and the first step is the pre-work. If you know anything about flipped learning, you may know that the delivery of any content, any lecture piece, or, you know, any information transfer is done outside of the synchronous piece, so that they don't come and hear me talking. That's not what we do when we meet. So I have lectures that with embedded questions. I use PlayPosit, or maybe you know Edpuzzle, or some other programs where you can embed questions. So I present the material that way. And then I also use Perusal, that you can put a textbook in, if you've ever heard of that. You can get your publisher to put your textbooks, the students buy the ebook, and then they can asynchronously, and even synchronously if they're on at the same time, discuss the readings outside of class. So all of that is outside of class. So then when they come to class, then it's all interactive. So we do peer instruction. They might prepare to do a mini lesson for each other if it's a methods course, or if it's a pedagogical grammar course, they might pick a particular piece of grammar to teach each other. So we do a lot of hands-on teaching. And then I also use breakout rooms where they might look at a scenario of a teacher and critique it, and then come back to the main room and talk about what they thought about that scenario. But they had a chance to talk in small groups in the breakout room. And you know, there are other steps to the model, but it gets to be a routine, so they kind of know what's expected when they come to the synchronous class. And there's always a sign-in, so they know that when they first come to class, I don't start class, they start it by a sign-in, and the sign-in always relates to either my lecture or the reading. And so that's some accountability that I built in. And we clarify misconceptions right at the beginning of class and that sort of thing. So it gives you a little bit of an idea.
Thank you.
If anyone has questions, I'm happy to talk to you, you know, outside of this, the parameters of this session.
That's a good way of thinking about how to combine synchronous and asynchronous teaching in teacher education. Michelle, we have about 10 minutes left. You want to take the last question?
Yeah, I also thank you, Helaine. I think you gave us a really nice bridge. I've been thinking about, you know, from the global context, and you think about all of the nations in which we live, some of our nations are doing a great job listening to the experts, right? Listening to the scientists and the epidemiologists and the people that know. And I think this is yet another conversation where we need to defer to the experts. And many of us in this room have said, I'm not an expert in online learning. So let's defer to the Helaine Marshalls. Let's defer to the people who have been doing this and have a system down. If you want to share that 8-point method, Helaine, in the chat box, or anything that you could share, that would be great. But I certainly feel more secure hearing someone like you talk about, I've been doing this for a long time, I've been training my students on how to do it. It makes me feel more comfortable. I wish that my country were doing something like that.
You know what's interesting, though, is that people like me were marginalized on our campus and looked down on. Oh, yes. She just teaches online. And now they're my new best friend. Oh, teach me how to do this. It's very interesting.
That is so interesting. It's so, well, I'm glad you're having your moment, because I need to learn from you. All right, so we've just got about 9 minutes here, but the last question, and I think it's taking us in the same direction, is around our hopes. So what do you hope that the teacher education field will learn through this difficult time?
Technology is not the answer. Pedagogy.
I think one of the important things is being part of associations, because it's a great opportunity for people to learn and share ideas. And a lot of people don't really know that, but it's really great and it really helps a lot. And you have like a support system and you can always ask questions and get new ideas by joining different associations. So that's one thing that's really important.
Along the same lines, I'm really encouraged by all of the sharing that's going on, because I think we have not known a lot about how online learning works, either for teachers as teacher educators or for their students. So I think this, I'm hopeful that this is going to just generate a ton of information about what works and what doesn't in what contexts.
And I just want to echo Hind and Julie's comments. I think that being part of associations, or we all say that we've, there's so much professional development online that, people get tired of it. So when was the last time that we said that? There's so much opportunity nowadays that you can pick and choose. Yes, there is so much of it, but you can find the one that suits your environment, or you can listen to other people across the world that have the same problems. So to end on a happy note, I think that, we should all be grateful, and we should pat ourselves in the back that we did well, and we'll be ready next time. So if this happens again, we'll all be qualified.
That's what I was thinking too, Georgios. Where I live, sometimes the weather is so cold that it's dangerous to go outside. I live in Minnesota, close to the Canadian border, and sometimes we have so much snow that you literally cannot walk down the street. And we all have our own issues, right? Some people have earthquakes, some people have tsunamis, we have different things, forest fires, that will prevent us from physically going into the building. So this is probably a skill set that we all need to have, right?
I know, I was a student in Minnesota, so
yeah.
a lot of snow
My
weeks.
condolences.
I was thinking it might help us rethink rural education. I know they have a lot of shortages of teachers, but there are ELLs in rural and remote locations. So I was thinking this might change the way we view how we interact with folks in those situations.
Nice.
Yeah, like for example, in Africa, I'm part of Africa TESOL, and now a lot of teachers are, presenting online and like for the very first time. So that's something that people are developing skills and learning new ways of communicating. I think it was a bit difficult at the beginning, but when they had to, they found ways to, connect online, find different ways to learn online, and it's great stuff.
Yeah, it does seem like our affiliates are getting a lot more traction, right? Like I'm noticing that like Dominican Republic TESOL, everybody wanted to present and go. And I was like, that's great, that we actually can. Because usually we think about our own limitations with travel and cost, and now we don't necessarily.
Affiliates rock.
I'm hoping
I have to say that.
I'm hoping that TESOL, the organization, rethinks how they do their conference. I mean, I love the in-person conference, but I think we should have a conference online every year for people who can't get to the main conference. And the one online this time, I was really excited about, because I thought it would draw people who otherwise couldn't attend, because of the cost and, the time off and things like that. And I think it might change up the way TESOL views what they do, maybe with more online symposia and that sort of thing. I'm hoping, anyway.
I was actually on a call this morning with David from TESOL, and they are thinking about that has changed the way that they're looking down the line, even for when we come back together. So yeah, on the table.
You're right, Julie, and even before COVID, I think, there was over the past 4 years, there was a 20% drop of face-to-face attendance, not in TESOL in particular, but in general. And so conferences were reporting a huge drop in face-to-face attendance, I think, and that's where we're moving toward now. A lot more people find it convenient, and more affordable. I read another report from the UK whereby an assistant professor was saying it takes her a whole month of pay to attend a conference. And so that's a huge investment. And so I think, you know, what's happening right now is making us rethink as to what face-to-face conference attendance is to support ourselves and each other. But, you know, and so it's a new era altogether.
What I'm hoping also is that the stakeholders, you know, powers that be, that they also realize that actually teaching online is a lot more work, and it's something that you know, as a teacher educator, as a trainee teacher, that you actually need to invest the time in. It's not, you know, something that you can do at the drop of a hat. And in response to what Helaine said earlier, you know, when you said you were marginalized and people, you know, scoffing off at you teaching online. I mean, my university has prepared now for the winter semester. We're supposed to go back to full face-to-face, and they've said that whoever wants to continue teaching online can do so, but they only count it as 1/3 workload. You know, so it's just 1/3 workload, and if you're teaching part online, then you have to provide adequate material and resources for those students that you meet face to face, and at the same time you've got to cater to those who are not coming to classes for whatever reasons, you know, being in risk group. So I don't see that going down very well. And Georgios, you said, you know, we've done it once before, we can do it again. Don't say that, because we asked about that at work, and I had some colleagues who asked about whether these workshops and stuff that they run over the summer semester, whether these were going to continue. And, you know, the university management said, no, you've done it once, you know how to do it. We don't need to have any more workshops. So obviously I was one of the lucky ones, because I jumped on the bandwagon and took every possible weekend workshop that was available. And those colleagues who didn't, and who, you know, just continued working with Blackboard or really, they're, you know, they're at a disadvantage now.
Well, that's what I said to I mean, I run the Teaching, Learning, and Development Center at my university. So when I said, you know, we have a full schedule until December for online teaching, they're like, no, teachers know how to do it. We don't need any more. But I insisted, so we still have them. Yeah. So don't worry. I'm an advocate for online teaching and online education. Thanks.
All right, I'm going to pull us back together, because I'm noticing that it is time. This has been such an engaging discussion. I love that we can have this global conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll continue to have these webinars monthly, and we'll share them through TEIS Facebook as well as my TESOL. And this winter, we will have another town hall similar to this one, and we'll share information ahead of that. So please enjoy your weekends, and it was so great to see and hear from you.
We'll try to send out some of the things that we talked here today through the TEIS forums for reflection and for perhaps some follow-up, because this has been such a generative discussion. We hope to be able to continue this on TEIS some more. So we thank you for being here with us and, you know, doing the job that we all do. So have a good afternoon or evening, and wherever you are. Thank you again. Bye.